Okay, well, I'm really excited to be here talking to you about our journey with federating our API and how we had to work with different teams and our leadership and try to convince them and get that buy-in to federate our API. I'll start by introducing myself. You can see a picture of me up there in case you need help recognizing me. My name is Shani, as was said, and I'm leading the API at Monday.com. I'm going to take a little hiatus now from the slides and the branding you guys have been used to all day to the Monday branding, because I introduced myself, but I also want to tell you a little bit about us at Monday.com. And I think for that, we need the Monday.com branding. So hopefully some of you know who we are and even work with us and even love the product. But for those of you who don't, Monday.com is a work OS platform, and it's a flexible platform that's really meant to help you do whatever it is that you're doing at work. So if you work and you're working with a computer, doesn't matter what industry you're in, if you're like us in the tech industry, or if you're in hospital organization, or if you work in soda distribution, or if you're a firefighter, Monday.com is meant to help you work better and to make everything kind of more lovable and easier to manage. What you see behind me is kind of our core, right? It's a board with items. Those are the rows. That's what we call them. And this is our core entity that everything is kind of built on top of. You can integrate this with different tools. You can feed it from different places, like forms that you see on the left. But really, everything is based on that, right? It's a board, and that is kind of flexible and something that you can change to match whatever it is that you're doing and that you need to get done. That same data, you can present it in many different ways. So it can be on a board view. So on top of your board, just kind of present that in dashboards or different types of ways that help you to understand the data. Most important of which is the llama farm that you see behind me, where you can see your items as llamas. And if they're sub-items, they're baby llamas. So that's a really important feature, and they're kind of in the color of the status that you have. And on top of this core, we have also multi-product platform. So there's Monday CRM, Monday Dev, other things that are around specific industries. So if you're working, in the service industry and you have very specific need for your platform and the way you manage your work, we wanted it to come out of the box to be more specific to what you need to do. There's also different products that help you to feed into your Monday boards or your Monday platform, like Work Canvas, which is a kind of whiteboard tool, or Forms, and it's all these different kind of tools, but at the essence, everything is on top of this core and what we call our platform. And I think this kind of wrapper is what makes the API sometimes more challenging, because all of these things don't have separate APIs. It's one API, one endpoint, that's an entry point to all of these, and also makes it a lot more interesting. So let's talk a little bit about our API journey. I think the most important thing when we talk about our API journey that we need to kind of understand how it happened is to understand that the API at Monday, the GraphQL API, was conceived for external purposes, so as a public API. So when it was built, it was meant to be for external developers to help read from the platform, make changes, maybe build their own apps. Maybe it's for an IT department that wants to run scripts, but it's as a public API. There was really only one internal usage that we used it for, and that was within our integrations. So our automations and integrations are something that helps Monday to connect to different tools, and we built a bunch of those before we opened it up to app developers so they could also build. And you can see different tools that we built for and that you can connect to Monday with. So Monday's been up and running for about a decade, and about 7 years ago, the first version of GraphQL went live. And about 3 years later, it first got kind of domain ownership at the open platform domain. So that's the people in charge of the apps domain and the app marketplace. So their persona and the person they were most interested in is these app developers that are external developers to Monday, looking to use the API to build tools to sell in our app marketplace to users. About a year and a half ago, so only in 2023, we were created as an API team. It was really understood that we need to have someone really focusing on the API as an infra and not just as some entry point into Monday and something for the app marketplace. So we were created as a team. We started running and thinking, okay, what do we want our API to be? We wanted to think of the vision. Where do we want this going? And really looking more at the big picture that had never been done. Of course, it didn't take much time for us to decide that what we needed was to federate. I think you guys, everyone here has heard a lot about federating API and all the different benefits. And we reached the same conclusion. We started working towards that. To give a little context of numbers and scope, when we just started, so in the first GraphQL version, we had under 20 different queries and mutations. Now we have about 200. And talking a little bit about scale in general, we have 150 million calls made to the API a day. We have closing in on 2,000 different apps that have been built. And this spans across almost 230 customer accounts. So all of this really led us to say, in order to be able to maintain and continue to grow the API, we really need to scale out, and what this means is federate. Because what used to work 7 years ago, when there wasn't even an API team, let alone different domain teams, because all of the R&D was 20 people, doesn't work anymore. That we have, not just this one monolith where we have the code, rather we have hundreds of microservices, and this is already 500 developers in the R&D. And if we want people to take ownership of their domain, the same way that we want them to take ownership of their domain when it comes to the product and the performance of their domain and everything, we also want them to take ownership of the API. And in order to do that, we really have to federate. We thought that this was the best way to break up the monolith and help standardize not just the way that external developers could be able to access the platform, but also to try and start thinking how we would make this the way inside Monday that people who aren't working on platform features would access the platform. And to try and face and look at different product teams that are accessing these core features and how we were going to make the GraphQL API work for them as well. So you can see behind me a pretty standard query where someone maybe wants to get their account and they want to get all their boards and just data in their boards, like the items. And a query like this would span across the ownership of 7 different teams. Because our teams now are around domains, and we don't want to have our team, that's just a few people, in charge of making all of these different domains great in the API. Because the same way that we want all of our product to be great, we want our API to be great. And for that, each team that knows their domain, that's familiar with their domain, they need to be the ones to take ownership. So we started our journey and we said, okay, the first thing is we need to enable the infra. Right? We want to federate the API, we have to have things ready in a way that people can just join on in. So obviously we're going to work first, we're going to make it so that people can just add their subgraphs, and we're just going to go out, we're going to talk to them, we're going to be like, listen, everything's ready. Come add your subgraph. It's going to be fantastic. And I think you've heard enough lectures today that you know what's coming. We went to the teams and we're like, come add your subgraph. And we even had some teams that really wanted to be in the GraphQL API. For example, CRM had a lot of requests from users that really wanted access to different features in CRM in the API, and it wasn't there yet. So they were interested. Right? So we said, listen, everything's ready. Just build your subgraph. And we understood that we were ready, but they weren't ready. Because our teams didn't really understand how to start. And they had a lot of hesitancy around getting started on this journey and what it even meant. So let's talk about the different pain points and the different things that bothered teams. When we looked at teams, we looked at 2 different types of personas. We have our consumers, where here, for the first time, we defined this new persona, and we said, we're looking at internal teams of developers, and those people that we want to get to start using the GraphQL API. And we looked at producers, which I think is very straightforward, right? People we want to create subgraphs, own their API. Maybe even not create a subgraph. Maybe just take ownership of their API in the monolith, right? But we want them to own it. We want them to feel that it's theirs and that they need to improve it. So the issues we saw when we started talking to teams were different between the two personas. And I think here we even had to kind of start by explaining why we cared about consumers, because it wasn't something within Monday that was done before. So I think one of the things that make us really great at Monday, or one of the things I love the most, is that we are very big at eating our own dog food. We love our product, we're all kind of groupies, and we use it for everything. So we use it, for managing works. Obviously, all our sprints are managed in Monday, and we plan the next queue, and we have our bugs backlog and everything. And also in life, like if you're getting married, or if you're moving a house, or anything you're doing in your life, you probably have a board for it in Monday. So we do that with everything, and then, if you're working on a specific domain, on a product, anything you do, you can kind of feel it in your day-to-day. Because if I do something and the product's not good, when I use it, it's not gonna be good, and it's gonna bum me out as well. And we really wanted people with the API to have that same feeling. We said if we want people to make good APIs and to connect to why it matters, we also want them using the API. And of course, we really did believe that what we were doing, the way we were building, our API, was the right way to go for internal communication. And all of the benefits of GraphQL that I assume if you didn't connect to, you wouldn't be here today, and of course of a federated API, we really believed this was the best way to continue to expand our platform. And that's something that we're obviously very focused on, and to have it done in a really protected way. The things we were hearing from these teams when we were talking to them, first and foremost, was just the overhead of a new technology. I've never worked with GraphQL. I really know how to use my REST endpoints. I know how to monitor them. I can do specifically exactly what I want. I can write the code by myself. I don't need anyone. And they just didn't want to slow down to learn this new technology. I think there was also a lot of hesitancy around observability and about how they would monitor these things. And of course, that they're just missing capabilities, right? I want to do something in the API, it's not there. For that, of course, we need the producers. If something's not there, we need someone to come in and build a subgraph. And here, people had the same hesitancy, the same pain points pretty much exactly. It's a new technology. The overhead worries me. I don't know what the performance is going to look like. I don't know how to monitor it. And they were just, kind of stuck there. So we realized we had to do something to change people's mind, right? We wanted people to let go of this perception. And we really wanted it to be something where we could kind of drive it bottom up and not have, something that someone tells them, oh, just move to GraphQL, but rather something that we would change the way that people saw it. And the first thing we decided to do is design stickers for our laptops, and to make them really exclusive stickers that only people who used subgraphs or built subgraphs got, and that was the most important thing that we did. No, probably not, but it was a lot of fun, and I do think that it was part, of this important rebranding that we did. We said the same way that we came in, 6 months ago, and did this whole shift in the way that we see the API, that's the same thing we want for the rest of the company, for the rest of the R&D at the very least. Whether you're working outside of Monday or working inside of Monday, if you're not a platform team working on core services, the platform API is the best way. And I think here we had to think, why, and what does that mean? And we had to come to teams and explain that it's not that scary, it's not in the monolith. Our monolith is in Ruby, and a lot of teams working in microservices in Node and TypeScript, they really didn't want to get back into Ruby. It's like, no, it's in your microservice. You can do your own continuous deployment. Everything's in the technology you know. And all of this around just making people understand that we're something new. And even though we weren't technically something new, I think that kind of branding it in this way helped us to move forward. We also set goals. We wanted to set ambitious goals, and we said, we now have one domain that owns the API, which is us, and we want to get to 5 different people by 2024. So this was us planning, 2024. And the first thing we did to get there is a subgraph workshop. We said we want to do something that can be quick. We're just going to have 2 days, and we're going to tell these teams, that are interested. The CRM team, for example, they wanted to be in the, in the platform API, but they were hesitant. We said, come in, 2 days, and you have something live. So they came in, we did a design, we explained what GraphQL was, we started working, we drank a lot of coffee, and we got something up and running in those 2 days. And we had 3 new subgraphs, and it was really something that was really exciting, big success. And we said, okay, great, we can have the next workshop and continue to build this out. Consumers, we wanted to triple the amount of people using the API internally. At this point, there were 2, so let's get to 6. And here we said we need different tooling, right? So it's something that's come up a lot today. I've heard in different lectures. Tooling really is the key. And we started with 2 different SDKs, one that would help people just get going, right? So first time they're using the API, how do they do that? And that's about, like getting a token and being able to authenticate and just make their first call. And the second one is around, exposing the types and having some simple operations. So something that's just the most common operations in the API, just have those in kind of restified, simple operations. We had some debate here because we said, on the one hand, we don't want to kind of move people into not learning GraphQL. So what are these simple operations really going to help us? But we really understood that what we needed was to make things as easy as possible. And even though these SDKs didn't do much when it came to lines of code, if you were writing in your microservice, you'd probably have about the same lines of code if you did it yourself or if you were using the SDK. But one of them was something that felt familiar, right? Using an NPM package, installing it, and just starting to work, and reading the README and having easy instructions, people got that and they just did it. And if we tried to explain it to them and give them this doc, even if it was just copy-pasting things, they were just less kind of willing to try something new. So this was just something that was kind of spoon-feeding it to them. And even though it's not the reason we did it and not what we expected, we also, we had this out externally, and we also saw a big uptake in people that started using the API externally. So kind of a win-win there. And I think the big thing here was just to get people's foot in the door, because these simple operations got people to make their first request, and then they would just make more and more, and they just learn GraphQL and find out that it's better, or just as easy at the very least. And I think the main thing that we learned here and that helped us to continue this ball is to just get constant feedback. So after every workshop, we'd sit down with people. It's one of those things that seems so obvious, but really is so important, is just to sit down with people and say, what didn't work for you? What are you still missing? And to continuously improve and really seek that out in a real way. So that was the beginning of 2024. And then we were planning, we'd reached we were reaching H2. We need to plan the second half of the year. Said, where are we at? And we really saw that we'd made a lot of progress. We'd gotten to 6, right? That was our goal for 2024, and we're planning now the second half of the year, but we've reached our goal. And when it came to producers, we hadn't reached the goal, but we were almost there, right? We had 4 already, even though we wanted 5. So it really seemed like everything was on track. Maybe the most disappointing thing is that we had dreamed pretty small, right? We'd kind of been hit with all this hesitancy of people going, whoa, GraphQL, and it's going to be too confusing and all this overhead. And we're like, okay, we'll plan goals and we'll be able to hit them. But, we were kind of dissuaded by people's pessimism. We shouldn't have been. We should have been more optimistic and kind of dreamed bigger. So we said, okay, seems like we're in a really good place. We'll set some higher goals, and we'll continue to reach out. We'll do more workshops, and we'll get there. And here, we were now at the point where we weren't talking to people that were already interested. Right? Until now, the workshops we did were with teams that kind of already had reason to want to be in the platform API because they had pressure from users, or they had pressure from their product to use some platform capability, and they really didn't want to go in and develop their own REST endpoints in a microservice that they totally didn't know. So we'd started with these people that had already kind of been sniffing around. And now our next challenge was these people that, wasn't in their mind at all. They weren't interested, but we had all the success behind us, and we said, okay, we have 6 more months. We're going to get more teams. And we set out, newly optimistic, and saw that it was a whole different ballgame, right? We were working now with people that really weren't considering it or didn't understand the value of it. And I'll give a specific example. We had something that to us seemed very obvious and very basic. What you see behind me again is our board. We have our item update, so you can see that I've opened an item, I've clicked on it, and then you can see different updates, and I've started writing an update there. So getting updates was in the platform API, but reacting to updates was not in the API, and also getting updates was not owned by the team that owns updates. So it was something that the API team had written, or actually the apps domain had written before there was an API team. And we really thought it was obvious here that the communications team that owns this land needs to take this ownership. So I thought it would be really obvious for them to come and do it, especially since we had a lot of requests for these small nuance features around updates, like reactions, which who doesn't like liking things? And we thought it would be something that easy, they'll jump on board. Especially because even internally, there were people who wanted to use them. So our Monday dev product team wanted to use updates to do things that weren't available. And we came to this team and we said, listen guys, Monday dev wants to do it. You can have them write REST endpoints, right, to do specifically what they want to do, and then they're going to go into your microservice and that whole mess. But next week it's going to be Monday service, right? It's going to be the other products that want something else that's a little different. And are they also going to write REST endpoints? And how are you going to maintain this? And who owns this? And when there's when you're woken up in the middle of the night, are you calling them? Are you doing it? So we thought it was so obvious. But we saw that they didn't want to. And specifically here, I sat down with someone there who's a lead developer there, one of the tech leads. And he said, I've been around at Monday for a while. And the GraphQL API, I don't think it's ready to move all this load there and to have the main flow of internal usage go through the GraphQL API. There's been incidents. Sometimes there's crazy scale from external developers or from integrations, and it can cause latency. And we're just not sure if it's stable enough for us to make this jump yet. So I think here, the first thing we did was get really frustrated. And our instinct was to be very defensive and to be like, listen, you've been here for 7 years. We've been working so hard for the past year. You don't understand. You're acting like nothing has changed. But we realized, the same way that this guy had, this hesitancy, other people did too. And it wasn't his problem. It was our problem. Because, we'd worked on our rebranding, but we hadn't focused on this aspect of it. And we understood that what we needed to do was, to take back the ownership here too, and to solve it and build trust in our platform API. So it's not just something that's easy and accessible and there and new and shiny, but something that's really trustworthy and something that's not just, stable, but will make people who use it more stable. Right? It's the way to protect the system and not the other way around. If someone's worried that using the platform API is going to put them at risk, they should be worried that using something else will put them at risk because the platform API has all the best limits. And it can throttle things properly and it blocks accounts when things get dangerous and all these things. We wanted it to just be something that was trusted. So we understood that we have different aspects and things that we need to tackle. Here, I think it really depends, on the usage and what you have inside in your company. For us, a big pain point was around limits, tenant-level limits, right? We don't want one account being able to do something excessive and affect anything else. We wanted to make sure that observability was something that was kind of matched and even exceeded anything that they already had with REST. And we wanted to show that the performance here was good. And what we realized is that we shouldn't be trying to convince people with our words. I don't want to, be writing and saying, you should really come join our next workshop. And then the person will tell me, no, but, I'm worried about this and this. To say, no, listen, it's fine, it's good. We just wanted to show people our work. So You can see in like very muted light blue up there that we turned off our mic in our notifications. But it really is what we tried to do, right? We said money.com in general, we want to be data-driven, and here we also need people to feel that they're making a data-driven decision when they're choosing the platform API. We had a board, of course, a board where we measured all the different actions. That's something that is really easy for anyone to see, not just developers, but product managers and leadership come into a board and see what's the success rate, what's the latency, P95, P99, what's the target latency, really to show that we're tracking it and we're on top of it, even more so than people with their REST API endpoints, and in one place that's really easy to track. And we made sure that we had dashboards in Datadog around specific domains, but also in our BI tool, so that people could see the business impact of what they're doing, and to make it so that they could choose their domain or choose their specific fields and see which accounts were using it, which apps were using it. When they rolled out a new feature, how did this affect usage? And I think all this was to help connect them to the impact of what this meant, and to show that this was really the best way to have more impact in these areas. And people beforehand didn't really realize that the platform API was something that would bring them impact in their own goals and their OKRs. And we wanted to help them see that this does connect. So again, we had a board with all the different coverage. Took us a long time, but we mapped out all of the domains, all the different types of operations, and really to show what percentage was covered, was available, was used, and to link it to different user requests and internal team requests. And of course, performance testing, something that we just, we wanted to show black on white. When you come out of the monolith to the platform API, you're just improving. We also wanted to take our workshop and we said, okay, we're doing all this work building trust. We want the workshop to be less than 2 days. We want it to be less than 1 day. We want it to be less than an hour. And it took some time to understand what we could take out, but we said we just need to make really excellent tooling and to get to a place where we can really take a team that's ready, that knows they want to join the platform API. They might not know exactly with what, and to just have them come, and within 30 minutes, they can have a subgraph up and running with one field, just one. Not everything they ever need, but one working field, and get it to staging. And I'll say that even, it was, a new microservice, not a lot of dependencies, but our fastest record was 13 minutes from, opening the code to getting a subgraph and staging, which was really exciting. I also lost a bet with a developer in my team that said it would be under 15 minutes, and I said it would be more, but I was happy to lose that bet. And I think here we saw that this was also something that was really impactful. We did it by having something that generated, not just helped them understand, but also really generated code. So we had our GraphQL server package that really had a plop file that already generated a ton of files in their microservice. You can see an earlier version of it here. And we tried to take all the feedback we'd gotten and have what was generated be what we'd heard that people were missing. Right? So they were saying, listen, I know how to authorize my fields. I know how to do that when I'm working with what exists today, and that doesn't exist for me in GraphQL. And we said, okay, we hear you. We're putting it inside the package. And you'll just have something that you implement very simply. You don't have to learn about subgraphs and about the technology. It just seems very straightforward, and you just have functions that tell you exactly what to do, including tests that come obviously with commented out code, and you have to implement them. We're not that fancy yet, but everything's kind of drawn out for you. And we saw that this impact was helping us to kind of reach people with word of mouth, which is what we wanted. We wanted people to be advocates and for them to come to us with requests to join or with requests to improve. Say, hey, I'm missing this, and then we can learn from that. We wanted to get them kind of buzzing around themselves with us, not going and trying to convince people, because we realized that this kind of attempt to convince a lot of the time was what was losing us trust. So today, we've changed our goals. They're not for 2024 anymore, they're for 2025. But our new goals are just all of it. All non-platform services, are working with the platform API. Externally and internally, just 100%. Producers, same. API team owns the infra of the API, right? We're in charge of the tooling, the federation, the stability. We don't own the API. We don't own different domains. That's 100% owned by the teams. And the progress has been really exciting. First of all, you can react to updates in the platform API. If anyone was worried, you can do it. So that was obviously very exciting. And we really do see teams discussing things, and we're getting requests from them of like, when can I join the new workshop? And we're like, we don't do workshops anymore. We just need a 1-hour meeting, and you're good. And these things are, things that are very exciting and coming to us. And for me personally, something that was kind of a fun success story. When I was building this talk originally, it actually hadn't happened yet, so I didn't know I'd have it here. But that same tech lead that I sat with, I think it was 7 or 6 months ago, that said, platform API is just, we're not ready to make the jump. So just a week and a half ago, he scheduled some time with me, and he said, listen, I'm now working on a project of when someone opens a new microservice, they're going to get everything bootstrapped with the way we want our happy path, all the tech stack that we think that non-platform services should have. And I think it needs to be with the platform API bootstrapped. Let's talk about what we need to make that happen, because I think 6 months from now, we should block all other internal communication usage. And I was so shocked, but I obviously was playing it cool. I was like, yeah, that sounds, obviously, it's exactly what we should do, and we'll make it happen. I'm like, well, we need to take things out of our queue and do this ASAP. So that was kind of really exciting. So to sum things up, I tried to think, what would my recommendations be to start rolling and to get this done? I think that everything does come down to having great tooling. There's a lot around it, but it doesn't work if you don't have great tooling. And you've heard in lots of different lectures today, I'm sure, different implementations of this tooling. I know that I've learned a lot. But you really need to have something that speaks to the pain points in your company. Having said that, if people don't trust the infrastructure that you have, they're not going to want to make the jump. And even if they do it because there's a mandate top-down, they're going to be worried. They're going to be working around it to make sure things on their end work okay. And that's not what you want. So you have to do the stability work, and you have to make sure that they can trust your infrastructure. And for us, what was really strong here was connecting teams to impact, making them understand what they were getting out of it, right? The what's in it for me, and how does it help their goals? How does it help to make them better? And not just something that's like, oh, GraphQL in general is great, but like your specific goals, what's it going to do for you? And just continuously get this feedback. Any tool we have, any workshop we had, just tell us what's wrong. Tell us what didn't work. Tell us what your pain points are, and feed that back in to all of these steps. So that's our journey. I hope it was insightful, or at least interesting. Yeah, thank you.